The massive ships appeared at the edge of the solar system like dark clouds blocking out the stars. Admiral Kekstar stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the blue planet grow larger on his screens. Earth looked exactly as the old records described it, a small world covered in water and land masses that should have been easy to conquer long ago. "Status report," Kekstar commanded his bridge crew. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never known defeat. The Zilithian Empire stretched across dozens of star systems, and every world they had visited had surrendered within days of their arrival. 50,000 ships in formation, Admiral," replied Commander Veloth. "All weapon systems are ready. Our sensors show the planet has some kind of civilization, but nothing that should concern us." Kekstar nodded and pulled up the ancient files on his personal display. The records from 2,500 years ago were incomplete and confusing. His ancestors had arrived at this same world expecting an easy conquest of primitive creatures called humans. The files mentioned something about flying machines that barely left the planet's surface and simple radio transmissions. But then something had gone wrong. The records became unclear, mentioning only a strategic withdrawal and unexpected complications. What complications could primitives cause? Kekstar had wondered many times. Now he would find out for himself and finish what his ancestors had started on Luna Station. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his comfortable chair and watched the approaching alien fleet through the massive viewing windows. The station orbited Earth's moon and served as the primary observation post for anything entering the solar system. Jake was a man in his 40s with kind eyes and graying hair. He wore a simple blue uniform that looked nothing like the military outfits of ancient Earth. "Computer, count the ships in that fleet," Jake said calmly while sipping his morning coffee. 50,000 vessels detected, Captain Morrison," the computer replied in a pleasant voice. "Configuration matches historical records of Zilithian Empire warships." Jake smiled and set down his coffee cup. He had been waiting for this day his entire career. Every human in the Defense Corps knew about the first Zilithian visit and what it had meant for their civilization. Now the aliens were back, and Jake felt excited rather than afraid. "Open a channel to Earth Command," he said. "Tell Admiral Crawford we have visitors, the old kind." The message traveled instantly to Earth through the quantum communication network that connected every human outpost in the solar system. On Earth, in the beautiful city of New Geneva, Admiral Lisa Crawford received the news while tending her rooftop garden. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and calm eyes that had seen many years of peace. Crawford set down her watering can and looked up at the sky. She could not see the approaching fleet, but she knew they were there. After decades of preparation and planning, the moment had finally arrived. "After all this time," she said quietly to herself, "I wondered when they would come back." She walked to her communication panel and sent a message to every human facility in the solar system. The message was simple and calm. "Our guests have arrived. Welcome them as we planned." Dr. Alex Chain sat in his office at the Antarctic Research Complex and watched the alien fleet approach through his telescope. As the chief Xenorchaeologist for the Terran Institute, Alex had spent his entire career studying the fragments of information left from the first Zilithian contact. He knew more about alien psychology and culture than almost any other human alive. "They have no idea what we have become," he told his assistant, Dr. Maya Patel, as she joined him at the telescope. Maya was a young woman with bright eyes full of curiosity. She had grown up hearing stories about the first alien contact and had always dreamed of meeting them herself. "Do you think they will be surprised?" she asked. Alex laughed softly. "Maya, they are about to receive the education of their lives." On Mars, in the vast agricultural domes of New Phoenix, Rick Davis paused in his work among the wheat fields. The red planet had been transformed over many centuries into a garden world that could feed billions of people. Rick was a farmer and engineer who had spent his life making the Martian soil rich and fertile. His wife, Helen, joined him as the general alert about the alien fleet reached their settlement. Helen was a botanist who specialized in plants that could grow in the Martian environment. Together, they had helped turn the hostile red world into humanity's second home. "Guess we are having company for dinner," Rick said with a grin. "Hope. They like vegetables," Helen smiled back at her husband. "Maybe we can show them how to grow food on worlds that were not meant to support life. They might find that useful." Far out in the Kuiper Belt, mining coordinator Sam Rodriguez oversaw the extraction operations on a small asteroid. His team included both humans and the artificial intelligence constructs that humanity had developed over the centuries. The AI units had become true partners in human expansion across the solar system. When news of the alien fleet reached the mining station, Sam was floating in zero gravity while inspecting a mining laser array. The work was dangerous and complex, but Sam enjoyed the challenge of extracting valuable materials from chunks of rock floating in the darkness of space. "Sam, should we halt operations and return to defensive positions?" asked Daria 7, the AI unit that helped coordinate the mining operation. Sam laughed and continued his inspection. "No, keep working. If they wanted to hurt us, they would have done it already. Besides, we have company coming, and I would rather finish this job first." ARIA-7 processed this information and found Sam's calm response logical. The AI had access to all historical records and understood that panic was not an appropriate response to the current situation. On the Zilithian flagship, Admiral Kekstar studied the energy readings his sensors were detecting throughout the solar system. Something was wrong with the data. The readings showed massive fusion reactors, industrial facilities, and what appeared to be permanent settlements on multiple worlds and moons. "This cannot be accurate," he told Commander Veloth. "The humans were barely capable of leaving their planet when we last visited. These readings suggest a civilization that spans their entire solar system." "Sir," reported Science Officer Nexal from her position at the sensor array, "I am detecting controlled antimatter reactions at multiple locations. Some of these installations appear to be mobile." Admiral Kekstar felt his confidence begin to waver. The ancient records had described humans as primitive creatures who could barely fly simple aircraft. But the evidence before him suggested something very different. This civilization had mastered technologies that even the Zilithian Empire considered advanced. "Continue the approach," he ordered. "We will demand their surrender as planned. Whatever they have built, they are still the same weak species our ancestors encountered." But deep inside, Kekstar was beginning to wonder if his assumptions about humanity were correct. The solar system ahead of them was not the primitive backwater described in the old records. It was something else entirely, and he was about to discover just how much humans had changed in 2,500 years. Admiral Kekstar grew more frustrated with each passing hour as his fleet approached Earth. His sensors showed impossible readings that made no sense according to the ancient records. The planet below was covered with cities that stretched across entire continents. Massive orbital installations floated in space around the world like metal moons. Even more confusing were the industrial signatures his ships detected throughout the solar system. "Commander Veloth, explain these readings to me," Kekstar demanded as he stared at his tactical display. "My sensors show what appears to be major construction on the fourth planet and industrial activity throughout the asteroid belt. How is this possible?" Veloth studied his own instruments with growing concern. "Sir, the energy signatures suggest a Type 2 civilization on the Kadashev scale, but that cannot be correct. The humans were barely space-capable when our ancestors visited them." "Perhaps our sensors are malfunctioning," Kekstar suggested, but he knew that was unlikely. Zilithian technology was reliable and had never failed them before. The truth was becoming clear, even though he did not want to accept it. Somehow, in just 2,500 years, the humans had transformed their entire solar system. On Mars, Rick Davis walked through the endless fields of his agricultural dome and marveled at how far humanity had come. The red planet beneath his feet had once been a frozen desert world where nothing could grow. Now it produced enough food to feed billions of people throughout the solar system. His wife Helen joined him as they received updates about the approaching alien fleet. She carried a basket of fresh tomatoes that had been engineered to thrive in Martian soil. The genetic modifications had taken centuries to perfect, but now Mars could grow crops that were impossible on Earth. "The news feeds are saying the aliens look surprised," Helen told her husband as she set down the basket. "Apparently they expected to find us still using chemical rockets and living only on Earth." Rick laughed and picked up one of the tomatoes. It was larger and more colorful than anything that had ever grown on the original Mars. "I guess they did not expect us to turn their neighbor planet into a garden world. Maybe we should invite them to stay for lunch." Deep in the asteroid belt, Sam Rodriguez continued his mining operations while keeping one eye on the news about the alien fleet. His current project involved converting a medium-sized asteroid into raw materials for the construction yards orbiting Jupiter. The work required precision and patience, qualities that humans had learned to master over the centuries. The AI unit, Area 7, monitored the mining lasers while simultaneously tracking the alien ships through the solar system's sensor network. Unlike humans, the AI could process multiple streams of information without losing focus on any single task. "Sam, the alien fleet appears to be scanning our operations," Area 7 reported through the facility's communication system. "Their energy signatures suggest they are confused by what they observe." Sam floated near a massive drilling platform that was slowly boring into the asteroid's core. Around him, automated systems worked to extract valuable metals and rare elements that would be shipped throughout human space. The entire operation was more complex than most planetary civilizations, yet it was just one of thousands of similar projects happening simultaneously. "Let them be confused," Sam replied as he checked the drilling progress. "We have had 2,500 years to get good at this. They are seeing what happens when a species has time to really develop. On Europa, beneath the thick ice covering the moon's oceans, Dr. Grace Thompson worked in the underwater research station, Atlantis 7. The facility was completely self-sustaining and powered by geothermal vents on the ocean floor. Humans had learned to live and work in environments that most species would consider impossible. The research station was home to 300 scientists and their families who studied the unique marine ecosystem that had developed in Europa's hidden oceans. Over the centuries, they had discovered life forms that existed nowhere else in the solar system and had learned to work with them, rather than simply studying them. Dr. Kevin Walsh, Grace's research partner, swam through the station's observation tubes while monitoring the alien fleet through their connection to the solar communication network. The tubes allowed humans to move through Europa's oceans alongside the native life forms they had learned to understand. "Grace, the aliens are running deep scans on all our installations," Kevin reported as he watched a school of bioluminescent creatures swim past the observation window. "I think they are trying to figure out how we built so much in such a short time." Grace smiled as she tended to a tank containing hybrid organisms that were part Europa native life and part human biotechnology. The creatures were beautiful and served important functions in the station's ecosystem. "They probably think in terms of conquest and dominance. They cannot understand that we learn to work with our environments instead of fighting against them." Back on the Zilithian flagship, Science Officer Nexal presented her preliminary analysis to Admiral Kekstar. The data she had collected painted a picture of human development that seemed impossible according to everything the Zilithians knew about technological advancement. "Admiral, I have completed my initial assessment of human capabilities," Nexal reported as she activated a holographic display. "The evidence suggests they have achieved full solar system colonization with permanent settlements on 7 planets and 43 moons." The hologram showed the entire solar system with human installations marked in blue light. The display looked like a 3-dimensional map of a vast empire that stretched from the sun to the outer edges of the system. Every major body was marked with some kind of human presence. "This is impossible," Kekstar muttered as he studied the display. "No species develops this quickly. It took our empire 10,000 years to achieve similar expansion across multiple star systems." There is more, Admiral, Nexal continued. Our long-range sensors have detected what appear to be human installations beyond this solar system. The energy signatures suggest they have achieved faster-than-light travel and have established colonies in nearby star systems. Commander Veloth stepped closer to the holographic display and pointed to several points of light beyond the solar system's edge. If this data is accurate, the humans have expanded far beyond their home system. They may have a larger population than our entire empire. Admiral Kekstar felt something he had never experienced before in his military career: uncertainty. Every previous conquest had followed the same pattern. The Zilithian fleet would arrive at a primitive world, demonstrate their superior technology, and accept the surrender of the local population. But the humans were clearly not primitive, and their technology appeared to be at least equal to Zilithian capabilities. "Maintain course," he ordered, though his voice lacked the confidence it had carried just hours earlier. "We will proceed with the original plan and demand their surrender. Whatever they have built, they are still the same species our ancestors encountered." But even as he gave the order, Kekstar knew that something fundamental had changed. The humans were not the primitive creatures described in the ancient records. They had become something else entirely, and he was beginning to realize that his 50,000 warships might not be enough to conquer them. The solar system ahead was not a target for conquest. It was the home of a civilization that had spent 2,500 years preparing for this moment. And as his fleet drew closer to Earth, Admiral Kekstar began to wonder if his ancestors had retreated not because of military defeat, but because they had recognized something that he was only now beginning to understand. As the Zilithian fleet entered Earth's orbital space, Admiral Kekstar decided it was time to make contact with the humans. He had studied the ancient protocols and knew exactly what to say. His ancestors had used the same message on dozens of worlds, and it had always worked perfectly. "Open all communication channels," Kekstar commanded his bridge crew. "Broadcast on every frequency the humans might be using." The transmission went out across the solar system, carried by powerful transmitters that could reach every corner of human space. Kekstar's voice was strong and commanding as he delivered the message that had brought countless civilizations to their knees. "Primitive humans of the third planet, you will submit to Zilithian authority as your ancestors failed to do. Prepare for occupation and integration into our empire. Resistance is futile and will only bring suffering to your people." The Admiral sat back in his command chair and waited for the expected response. Usually, primitive species would reply with panicked messages, begging for mercy or desperate attempts to negotiate. Some tried to hide, others tried to run, but they all eventually surrendered when faced with Zilithian military power. Instead, the response came from empty space around his fleet. Captain Jake Morrison's voice filled the Zilithian communication channels, calm and amused as if he were discussing the weather with an old friend. "This is Captain Morrison of the Terran Defense Grid. Welcome back to the Sol System. We have been expecting you." Admiral Kekstar stared at his communication display in confusion. Response came from where? He demanded of his sensor officer. "Sir, the transmission originated from approximately 2 kilometers off our starboard bow. But our sensors show nothing in that location." "Empty space. Impossible," Kekstar muttered. "There are no vessels in our vicinity. Our sensors would detect any ship within 100,000 kilometers." Captain Morrison's voice returned, still carrying that strange tone of amusement that the Admiral found disturbing. "Computer, decloak local grid." Suddenly, the space around the Zilithian fleet came alive with light and movement. Hundreds of ships materialized from what the aliens had thought was empty vacuum. Each vessel was sleek and obviously advanced, completely invisible to Zilithian sensors until they chose to reveal themselves, but the ships were only the beginning of the shock. As the human vessels decloaked, they revealed something that made Admiral Kekstar's blood run cold. The ships were not separate entities floating in space. They were part of a massive network that stretched around the entire planet like a metal web, what the Zilithians had mistaken for scattered Orbital installations were actually components of a single integrated defense system. The network was so large and complex that it took several minutes for Zilithian sensors to map its full extent. "By the ancient stars," Commander Veloth whispered as he stared at his tactical display, "the entire planet is surrounded by a fortress." On the human flagship Meridian, Admiral Lisa Crawford stood on her bridge and smiled as she watched the alien fleet react to the revelation. The ship was beautiful and advanced, but it was also comfortable and peaceful. The bridge felt more like a garden than a military command center, with living plants growing alongside the advanced technology. "Dr. Price, would you like to explain to our visitors what they are seeing?" Crawford asked the man standing beside her. Dr. Nathan. Price was a xenocultural specialist who had spent decades studying Zilithian society and language. He was a gentle man in his 40s with kind eyes and a patient manner that made him perfect for first contact situations. When he stepped forward to the communication array, his face showed excitement rather than fear. "Greetings, Admiral Kekstar of the Zilithian hegemony," Dr. Price said, speaking in flawless ancient Zilithian. His pronunciation was perfect, as if he had learned the language from native speakers rather than ancient records. The Zilithian bridge fell completely silent. Not only were the humans speaking their language, but they knew the Admiral's name and rank. How was that possible when the two species had not communicated for 2,500 years? "We remember you," Dr. Price continued in his careful Zilithian. "We remember your ancestors' visit to our world, and we have spent the last 2,500 years preparing for your return. Your records are incomplete, Admiral. When your ancestors departed our world, they did not retreat in defeat." Admiral Kekstar found his voice and activated his communication system. "How do you know our language? How do you know who I am?" Dr. Price smiled, though the alien could not see his expression through the audio-only channel. "We have had a long time to study everything your ancestors left behind. We learned your language, your culture, your technology, and your history. We know more about the Zilithian Empire than most Zilithians do." "That is impossible," Kekstar replied, but his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. "Your ancestors left because they recognized something that you are only now beginning to understand," Dr. Price explained patiently. "We were not the primitive species you assumed us to be. We were a young species with unlimited potential, and your visit taught us what we needed to know about the galaxy." In the asteroid belt, mining coordinator Sam Rodriguez received new orders through the quantum communication network. He grinned as he began activating systems that had been dormant for centuries, waiting for exactly this moment. "ARI-7, show our guests the forge," Rodriguez commanded. The AI complied without hesitation. Around Sam's asteroid, massive structures began to unfold like mechanical flowers blooming in the darkness of space. What the Zilithians had catalogued as a simple mining operation revealed itself as something far more sophisticated and impressive. The asteroid itself began to change shape. Its rocky exterior cracked and split, revealing advanced technology hidden beneath the surface. The Zilithians watched in amazement as the asteroid transformed into a massive starship, its hull gleaming with weapons and defensive systems. Sam, Area 7 observed with what sounded like satisfaction. "They appear to be quite surprised." "Yeah, well, we have had a long time to get creative," Rodriguez replied as he watched similar transformations begin throughout the asteroid belt. Dozens of what the aliens had assumed were simple mining operations revealed themselves as mobile battle stations, each one capable of interstellar travel and armed with weapons the Zilithians did not recognize on the Zilithian flagship. Science. Officer Nexal frantically updated her tactical analysis as more and more human installations revealed their true nature. What had appeared to be a peaceful solar system full of farms and research stations was actually the most heavily defended space in the galaxy. "Admiral, I am detecting weapon signatures beyond our classification system," she reported with barely controlled panic. "These installations are not just military bases. They are weapons platforms designed for interstellar warfare." Admiral Kekstar stared at his displays as the true scope of human preparation became clear. Every habitat, every mining station, every research facility had a military component hidden within its peaceful exterior. The entire human civilization had been designed as a defense network that could mobilize in minutes. They have been waiting for us, he realized with growing horror. For 2,500 years, they have been preparing for our return. Dr. Price's voice returned to the communication channel, still patient and friendly despite the massive display of military power surrounding the alien fleet. Admiral Kekstar, your ancestors were not defeated by our weapons or our armies. They retreated because they understood what we were becoming. We invite you to make the same wise choice they did. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Kekstar began to understand what fear felt like. His 50,000 ships were surrounded by a defense network that had been specifically designed to counter Zilithian tactics and technology. The humans had spent millennia preparing for this exact moment, and they were ready for anything his fleet could do. The question now was whether he would be wise enough to recognize the truth his ancestors had learned 2,500 years ago. 3 days after their shocking arrival, Admiral Kekstar found himself aboard a human space station that had not existed when his fleet first entered the solar system. The station materialized between Earth and Mars specifically for their meeting. Constructed by automated systems in less than 24 hours, the facility was larger than most Zilithian cities and powered by technologies the Admiral did not recognize. What amazed him most was how quickly the humans had built it. His own empire would have needed months to construct something similar, yet the humans had created it in a single day as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. The human delegation was surprisingly small for such a momentous occasion. Admiral Lisa Crawford led the group with her calm presence and gentle smile. Beside her stood Dr. Nathan Price, the linguist who spoke perfect Zilithian, Captain Jake Morrison from the Defense Grid, and Dr. Amanda Foster, a young historian with bright, intelligent eyes. "Please sit," Admiral Crawford offered, gesturing to chairs that automatically adjusted to Zilithian physiology. The technology was subtle but impressive, showing that humans understood alien biology better than most species understood their own neighbors. Admiral Kekstar remained standing, accompanied by his science officer and cultural advisor. The Zilithian delegation felt uncomfortable and uncertain, emotions they rarely experienced when dealing with other species. "Your species has evolved significantly since our last encounter," Kekstar said, trying to maintain some diplomatic composure. Despite his growing amazement at human capabilities, Dr. Foster activated a holographic display that filled the center of the meeting room. The projection showed Earth as it had appeared 2,500 years ago, a single blue planet with primitive technology and a small population struggling to reach beyond their atmosphere. "Not evolved, Admiral," she explained with enthusiasm. "Adapted. Your ancestors' visit taught us valuable lessons about our place in the galaxy and what we needed to become to survive." The hologram began to change, showing the slow but steady transformation of human civilization over the centuries. The display revealed the gradual expansion throughout the solar system, the terraforming of Mars, the construction of orbital habitats, and the development of technologies that rivaled anything in Zilithian space. "We realized that if we were to survive as a species, we needed to become something more than what we were," Dr. Price explained in his careful Zilithian. "Your ancestors showed us the galaxy was not empty, and more importantly, that it was not necessarily friendly to weak civilizations." The holographic timeline continued its story, revealing the true scope of human development. The display showed massive construction projects, the establishment of colonies beyond the solar system, and the creation of technologies that the Zilithians were only beginning to understand. "But this is merely infrastructure," Commander Veloth protested, studying the projections with growing confusion. "Where are your weapons? Where are your armies? How do you defend such a vast territory?" Captain Morrison laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the station's vast meeting chamber. His amusement seemed genuine rather than mocking, as if the question had revealed a fundamental misunderstanding. You are looking at them, Morrison replied with his characteristic grin. The hologram shifted to show the true nature of human expansion throughout the galaxy. Every habitat was also a fortress capable of defending itself. Every mining operation doubled as a weapons manufacturing facility that could produce advanced armaments within hours. Every agricultural dome on Mars could be converted to military production with a simple command. We learned from you, Admiral Crawford explained with patient kindness. Your ancestors taught us that the galaxy contains species with expansionist tendencies and military ambitions. So we expanded first, but we did it in our own way. Dr. Foster manipulated the holographic display to show human colonies beyond the solar system. The projection revealed settlements on worlds the Zilithians did not even know existed, connected by transportation networks that spanned hundreds of light years and supported by technologies that seemed almost magical. When your ancestors retreated from Earth, Dr. Foster continued, they were not defeated by our weapons or our armies. They retreated because they realized what we were becoming. They could conquer our planet, but they could never hold it against a species that had learned to think on galactic scales. Science Officer Nexal studied the population figures displayed in the hologram with growing amazement. The numbers seemed impossible according to everything she knew about biological reproduction and colonial expansion. These population statistics suggest there are more humans in your outer colonies than there are Zilithians in our entire empire, she said with barely concealed shock. Numbers are not everything, Dr. Price replied diplomatically. But they do matter when planning for the long term. We have had 2,500 years to grow, to learn, and to prepare. Not for war, Admiral Kekstar, but for coexistence. The hologram changed again to show something that made the Zilithian delegation step backward in surprise. The display revealed the true extent of human space, showing colonies and outposts scattered across a region of the galaxy larger than the entire Zilithian Empire. This cannot be accurate, Admiral Kekstar said, but his voice lacked conviction. The evidence was overwhelming and impossible to dismiss. We do not conquer worlds, Admiral, Admiral Crawford explained gently. We plant gardens. We build homes. We create places where different species can live together and learn from each other. Your ancestors could have destroyed our planet, but they chose wisdom instead of destruction. Dr. Foster activated another section of the hologram that showed recent diplomatic contacts between humans and other species. The display revealed active trade relationships, cultural exchanges, and cooperative projects with dozens of civilizations that the Zilithians had never even heard of. How many species have you contacted? Commander Veloth asked with growing amazement. We have established peaceful relations with 47 different civilizations, Dr. Price replied. We learned that cooperation produces better results than conquest. Your ancestors taught us that lesson when they chose to leave rather than destroy us. Admiral Kekstar stared at the holographic display and began to understand the magnitude of what his ancestors had encountered. The humans had not been defeated because they were not the enemy. They were something else entirely, something the galaxy had never seen before. What do you want from us? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Crawford smiled and gestured to the construction visible through the station's massive viewing windows. Outside, human and Zilithian work crews labored together on projects that neither species could complete alone. We want what we have always wanted since your ancestors first visited our world, she replied. We want you to stay. We want you to learn. We want you to help us build something better than either of our species could create alone. The hologram faded, leaving the two delegations facing each other in the peaceful meeting room. For the first time since arriving in the solar system, Admiral Kekstar began to understand why his ancestors had chosen retreat over victory. The humans were not a species to be conquered. They were a species to be joined. 1 year later, Admiral Kekstar stood on the observation deck of the joint human-Zilithian research station orbiting Earth. The facility was a perfect example of what both species could accomplish when they worked together. Human creativity and Adaptability merged with Zilithian engineering precision to create something neither civilization could have built alone. I confess this was not the outcome our strategists predicted. Kekstar told Dr. Nathan Price, who had become his closest human friend during the past year. Dr. Price smiled as he watched the bustling activity in the station's central hub through the large viewing windows. Humans and Zilithians worked side by side on projects that would benefit both civilizations. Their different approaches to problem-solving created unexpected innovations that surprised everyone involved. Your strategists were working from old information, Price replied in perfect Zilithian, his mastery of the language now complete after months of daily practice. We are not the same species your ancestors encountered 2,500 years ago. Through the observation windows, they could see the construction of humanity's greatest achievement yet. The first joint colony ship was taking shape in the orbital shipyards, a massive vessel designed to carry both human and Zilithian settlers to a new world beyond both their territories. The project represented something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly cooperative expansion that neither species was attempting to control. The ship was beautiful in its complexity, combining the best technologies both civilizations had developed. Human bioadaptation systems worked alongside Zilithian quantum drives to create a vessel that could sustain thousands of colonists during the long journey to their new home. Every system had been designed by mixed teams of engineers who learned from each other's expertise. On Mars, farmer Rick Davis walked through his enhanced wheat fields with a group of Zilithian agricultural specialists. The aliens were amazed by humanity's approach to terraforming and planetary development. Instead of simply forcing their will on hostile environments, humans had learned to work with planetary systems to create sustainable ecosystems. Your methods are inefficient, commented Zilithian agricultural advisor Moran, but her tone carried respect rather than criticism. However, they appear to be permanent. Our colonies require constant technological support to remain viable, while yours become self-sustaining living worlds. Rick grinned and picked up a handful of rich Martian soil, letting it run through his fingers. The red dirt had been transformed over centuries into fertile earth that could support any crop humanity needed to grow. We learned patience, Rick explained to his alien guests. When you plan for thousands of years instead of decades, you approach problems differently. We do not just want to survive on new worlds, we want to make them into homes where our children can live happily. Helen Davis joined the group carrying a basket of vegetables that could never have grown on the original Mars. The Zilithian specialists examined the produce with scientific curiosity, impressed by the genetic modifications that allowed Earth plants to thrive in alien environments. We would like to learn these techniques, Moran said as she studied a tomato that was larger and more nutritious than anything grown in Zilithian space. Our empire has many worlds that could benefit from this approach to agricultural development. In the depths of Europa's oceans, Dr. Grace Thompson guided another Zilithian delegation through her underwater research facilities. The aliens were fascinated by humanity's ability to live and work in environments that most species would consider impossible to inhabit. The research station had grown over the past year, expanding deeper into Europa's hidden seas and discovering new forms of life that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Human scientists worked with Zilithian researchers to study creatures that challenged everything both species thought they knew about biology. Your ancestors came to our system looking for subjects to conquer, Dr. Thompson explained to the Zilithian marine biologist swimming beside her through the observation tubes. We transformed ourselves into partners that the galaxy would want to cooperate with instead of fight against. The Zilithian scientists studied the hybrid organisms that humans had developed in partnership with Europa's native life forms. The creatures were beautiful and served important functions in maintaining the station's ecosystem while providing new insights into biological adaptation. This approach to colonization is completely different from our traditional methods, the alien researcher observed. You do not dominate your environments, you become part of them. Back on the orbital research station, Admiral Lisa Crawford joined the conversation between Kekstar and Dr. Price. Captain Jake Morrison accompanied her. Now serving as the military liaison for the Joint Defense Initiatives, both species had begun developing together. Admiral, Crawford addressed Kekstar with the warm familiarity that had developed between them over the past year. Your fleet is welcome to remain in our system as long as you wish, but I suspect your people back home are eager to hear about what you have discovered here. Kekstar's expression showed the contentment he had found working with humans over the past months. Many of his officers had requested permission to remain in the solar system to continue their educational exchanges with human scientists and engineers. They are eager for news, he agreed. But many of my officers have asked to stay and continue these learning opportunities. Your species has become something we never anticipated, not just technologically but philosophically. Morrison chuckled as he watched construction work continuing on the joint colony ship. Educational is one way to put it. Your civilization represents something unique in our experience, Kekstar continued. Your expansion throughout the galaxy is not conquest in any form we recognize. It appears to be an invitation to join something larger than any single species could create alone. Dr. Price nodded thoughtfully as he considered the implications of what both species had accomplished together. We learned that lesson from your ancestors, too. They showed us that the galaxy contains many different approaches to civilization and development. We decided to become the kind of civilization that others would choose to join rather than the kind they would want to escape from. As if summoned by their conversation, the station's communication system announced the arrival of yet another delegation. This time the visitors were from the Corellian Republic, a species that had been monitoring the human-Zilithian cooperation with growing interest. They were the third major galactic civilization to request formal diplomatic contact with humanity. In the past 6 months, Admiral Crawford smiled as she watched the approaching Corellian vessels through the observation windows. It seems word about our partnership is spreading throughout the galaxy. Indeed, Kekstar agreed with satisfaction. The galaxy is becoming a much more interesting place than it was when I first arrived here. Outside the station, construction continued on the joint colony ship while Earth turned slowly in its orbit below them. The blue planet had become not the center of a human empire, but the heart of something entirely new in galactic civilization. The humans had waited 2,500 years for the aliens to return, and when they finally arrived, humanity was ready. They were prepared not with weapons or threats, but with open hands, infinite patience, and the wisdom that comes from thinking in terms of millennia rather than years. In their smile lay the promise of a galaxy transformed not through conquest, but through cooperation and the patient work of building something worth joining.